Hi, my name is Sammy Peterson. I use she, her pronouns, and today I will be presenting the summary of my academic research for my Design Thinking Challenge. I am a seventh grade science teacher at Hopkins West Junior High, which is a western suburb of Minneapolis. I noticed in my space that a lot of my students, especially post COVID, really struggle with finding an appropriate outlet for distracting movement based behaviors. What I mean by that is, I noticed that a lot of my kids seem really fidgety and restless and have a tendency to roam around the room a lot more than I was seeing before COVID. And so, with this context, my design thinking challenge is investigating the question: how might we create a way to help students reduce the frequency of distracting movement based behaviors in order to increase engagement? And so, here's an overview of the research that I'll be sharing with you today. First, I'll be talking to you about some classroom management strategies that I have found to be aligned with movement based behaviors. I'll be talking about movement in the classroom and at the school in general. I'll be talking about the impact of movement on attention, then memory, then behavior. And I'll wrap up by talking to you about big conclusions and some next steps for my design thinking project. Through my research, as I was looking for some potential ways to understand my design thinking challenge better, the first big concept that appeared to me was this idea of classroom management strategies. And I really was able to boil this down to one main subcategory or subconcept, and that is proactive management strategies. Proactive management strategies are classroom management strategies that you do as a teacher before class starts. They're things that are built into your instructional approach. And so, some examples of proactive classroom management strategies, and these appear in papers written by Moon et al. In 2022, Negro et al. In 2019, and Terada in 2019. Whole group response systems include things like choral response, using dry erase boards to have students respond. It's the idea that you want to get as many kids involved as possible, which can make it easier to avoid some of those behavior issues that can come up in class. Proactive management strategies can also include visual strategies or cueing, like switching the lights, auditory cues like a bell or a timer, or call and response, in addition to physical cues like a hand signal. Another instructional strategy is the element of student choice, allowing students to choose their task order or choose their partner, in addition to relationship building, like greeting students at the door, developing a relationship with your kids. All of these things are positively correlated with positive student behavior outcomes. This is backed up in a paper by Larson et al. In 2018. Moon et al. 2022 suggested that movement strategies also have a strong supportive relationship with other effective instructional management strategies. And so, as I started looking more into ways to incorporate movement as a potential classroom management strategy, this finding was super important because it supports the idea that movement and classroom management strategies go hand in hand. And it also offers a way for us to think about incorporating movement as a type of proactive management strategy, something we can build in beforehand that has an impact on our classroom management. The next major concept that appeared in my research, that appeared in almost every research article I read, was this concept of movement. And I broke down movement into two different sub-concepts. One of them is movement-based instruction, or MBI. Movement-based instructional strategies are things that are integrated into general classrooms. So these are really great for individual teachers looking to incorporate some movement into their own spaces. And in the research that I saw by Mavildi et al. 2022 and Mavildi et al. 2018, it broke apart movement-based instruction into two key elements. One of those is relevance, or how related the movement is to the content that you're actually teaching, as well as integration, which is the connection in time between the movement and the learning task. And I'll go through some different combinations of relevance and integration so that it's a little easier to understand how those things weave together and can impact instruction. Mavildi et al. 2022 found that the highest effect on academics and on student behavior was found with activities with high relevance, so when the movement is related to the content, and that there was also a significant effect on academics for high integration activities, so when the movement is close in time to the learning task. And to understand this a little bit better, I have a chart here where it has on the y-axis going up and down, it has integration, so high integration at the top, low integration at the bottom, and it has relevance along the x-axis with high relevance on the right side, low relevance on the left side. And this is an adapted version of a chart published in Mavildi et al. 2018. In the top right corner, we have high relevance and high integration. This is when movement contributes to learning content. So the movement is close in time and related to the content. Some examples of this would include gestures, for example, dancing to learn the word dance in another language. And examples of high integration, high relevance content were found in many different sources, including Madsen et al. 2020, Mavildi et al. 2022, Mavildi et al. 2018, Negro et al. 2019, and Marilyn Gosner 2021. This is probably the highest potential for integrating movement-based activities with content. And so just below that in the high relevance, low integration, so this would be highly relevant to the content, but the movement is before or after the learning. This is the one that I found the least frequently in my work. It was appeared in Mavildi et al. 2022 and Mavildi et al. 2018. The examples provided for this are whole body movements that we use to kind of refresh the brain. On the top left-hand corner, we have high integration and low relevance. So this would be moving while learning, but the movement isn't necessarily related to the learning. An example cited in some of this research included jumping rope while learning multiplication tables. And this work was found, again, Mavildi et al. 2022, Mavildi et al. 2020, and Ruland and Lange 2021. A lot of this research is new and includes a lot of the same researchers. In the bottom left corner, we have low relevance, low integration movement, and these are types of activities that are not related to the content and happen before or after learning. So they're not close in time and not related to content. Some examples of this that showed up in Buchanan et al. 2021, Mavildi et al. 2022, Mavildi et al. 2020, Mavildi et al. 2018, Marilyn Gosner 2021, Rainey et al. 2017, and Ruland and Lange 2021 included movement or activity breaks in addition to MVPA, moderate to vigorous physical activity, which is an acronym I'll break down as my next subconcept. Under the larger umbrella of movement, in the low relevance, low integration category, so when activity is not related to the content and happens before or after learning, is this idea of moderate to vigorous physical activity, or MVPA, which is the other type of movement that appeared in a lot of the research that I was reading. So one element was MBI, which was the idea of integrating movement into the learning process, whereas MVPA focuses more on the amount of movement that kids get throughout the school day. So this is the amount of moderate to vigorous physical activity kids have. And in many sources, including Buchanan et al. 2021, Carlson et al. 2015, Hajar et al. 2019, Mavildi et al. 2020, Mavildi et al. 2018, Maykel et al. 2018, Marilyn Gosner 2021, and Moot et al. 2022, MVPA, or physical activity, is linked with positive academic and behavioral outcomes. And so we can tell that activity itself is really highly related to positive academic outcomes. Hajar et al. 2019 and Ruland and Lange 2021 looked at the idea that the intensity and type of activity affects the degree of impact on the cognitive outcome. And so they suggest that there may be differences in outcome based on the type of physical activity. And lastly, Buchanan et al. 2021 suggests that physical activity itself can alleviate some neurological damage associated with chronic stress. And when we think about the context where most of our kids exist right now, we're thinking about students who have experienced chronic stress and trauma in the form of COVID-19, in addition to other chronic stressors. And so anything we can do to help alleviate some of those neurological changes is going to be really impactful on academic outcomes. And now that we understand what different types of movement in a classroom or a school space can look like and how they are connected to effective instructional classroom management techniques, Now I'm going to be looking at how those movement-based activities and physical activity in general has an impact on things like attention, memory, and behavior. So when defining attention, Rainey et al. 2017 and Ruland and Lange 2021, in addition to Hajar et al. 2019, helped to define attention in two different ways. Selective attention looks like on task behavior. And so selective attention is actually more closely related with behavior. And so that will come up when I discuss behavior as its own concept. Sustained attention, however, is this focus over long periods of time, which is really important when we think about the length of time that students are asked to work at school. We are also seeing that it is subject to mental fatigue. So we know that anecdotally, by the time our students get to fourth block, they're tired because they've been in school for many hours throughout the day. So when we look at the effect of movement on attention, the research shows, including articles by Hajar et al. 2019 and Ruland and Lange 2021, that physical activity, or MVPA, improves attention. In addition to MVPA improving attention, Carlson et al. 2015, Maykel et al. 2018, Mavildi et al. 2018, and Negro et al. 2019 show that movement-based instructional interventions also improve attention. So both of those elements of movement have a positive impact on attention. However, Mavildi et al. 2022 found no significant effect of movement-based instruction on cognitive processing, including attention, concentration, sustained attention, information processing, and executive functioning. And so it's important to know that although there are multiple sources to suggest that there's a positive link between movement and attention, there is a finding that counteracts that finding. In addition to using attention as a way to measure the academic outcome of movement-based instruction, memory is another concept because it is another way that the impact of MBI is studied. And Mavildi et al. 2022 and Mavildi et al. 2020 commonly defined memory as working memory as a way to incorporate encoding and retrieving information. So it's the way our brain stores and then reprocesses and retrieves that information. Buchanan et al. 2021 suggests that chronic stress can negatively affect memory. And as I suggested in my findings about attention, when we think about chronic stress, we know that all of our students have experienced chronic stress in the last few years because of going through a pandemic, in addition to some of the other chronic stressors that exist just in our students' home lives and situations. And so another theme was looking at the effect of movement on memory. Mavildi et al. 2022, Mavildi et al. 2018, and Marilyn Gosner 2021 suggest that high relevance movement assists memory. And so what that means is that because high relevance movement, because movement that is really related to the learning content engages both sensorimotor and cognitive parts of your brain, it can help support the memory encoding process. Marilyn Gosner 2021 and Tarad 2022 found that activity breaks help to consolidate memory. So they found that when our brain is quote unquote resting, when we're taking a break from learning, our brain activity is actually really high, and these breaks in instruction, quote unquote breaks in instruction, are actually times when our brain is processing and consolidating information that we've just learned. And so they find that even low relevance, low integration movements like activity breaks are helpful, have a positive effect on memory. Mavildi et al. 2020, to the contrary, found that short duration physical activity does not significantly affect memory. And so it seems that the length of time that physical activity goes on for is an important factor in the effect of movement on memory. And the last concept that appeared in my research was this idea of behavior. And this is a really meaty concept because behavior can look like a lot of different things. It is also commonly used as an outcome measure of how effective instructional strategies are. And so Carlson et al. 2015, Ruland and Lange 2021, Mavildi et al. 2020, Mavildi et al. 2022, and Maykel et al. 2018 all define on-task behavior in terms of active engagement and passive engagement. So students that are still doing the learning task at hand, whether actively doing it or sort of passively, quietly listening. Both of those things are defined as on task behavior. Whereas Buchanan et al. 2021, Mavildi et al. 2022, Mavildi et al. 2020, Maycall et al. 2018, and Rainey et al. 2017 define off task behavior in two different ways. In one way, they're categorized as motor off task, so movement based off task, verbal off tasks, so like talking to a neighbor, and passive off tasks, so maybe like head down or doodling, as one way to categorize off task behaviors. The other way that showed up in research to categorize off task behaviors was non compliant off task behaviors, inattentive off task behaviors, and disruptive off task behaviors. So the first one looked more at the like physical movements being done, and the second categorization of off task behaviors is looking more at the effect of those things. So are they being non-compliant? Is that behavior inattentive, or is it disrupting the classroom environment? Importantly, connected to all of these definitions or measurements for behavior, Negra et al. 2019 and Ruland and Lange 2021 suggest that behavior challenges or more off-task behaviors are linked with other negative academic outcomes. And so when we think about the effect of movement on behavior, and referring back to the design thinking challenge, right, I'm looking at distracting movement-based behaviors. And so some of those would fall into motor off-task behaviors. Some of them may look like disruptive off-task behaviors. Some of them might look like lower on-task behaviors. And so many studies, including Buchanan et al. 2021, Carlson et al. 2015, Mavildi et al. 2022, Mavildi et al. 2020, Maykel et al. 2018, Moon et al. 2020, Rainey et al. 2017, Ruland and Lange 2021, and Terada 2022. So a large number of authors suggested that sustained low relevance movement leads to higher on-task behavior and lower off-task behavior. So when on-task behavior and off-task behavior are both recorded, many of these studies suggest that long-term low relevance movement, so that would include moderate to vigorous physical activity or MVPA, that bottom left quadrant, leads to those behavior outcomes we're looking for. Looks like higher engagement, looks like lower off-task behaviors. There is one study by Mavildi et al. 2020 that shows that movement did not lead to a change in off-task behavior, which goes against some of these other findings. But even Mavildi et al. 2020 still found that it had a change in on-task behavior. So Mavildi et al. 2020 found that there was a higher amount of on-task behavior, but no effect on changing the amount of off-task behavior. The last subcategory I have under behavior is teacher moves that have an impact on behavior. Larson et al. 2018, Neger et al. 2019 suggest that classroom management strategies can have an effect on behavior, which sort of connects back to the first concept that I talked about, which was classroom management strategies, and how some of these proactive management strategies can have an impact on academic outcomes. And so we're returning back to this, and we're seeing that some of those management strategies can affect behavior. Larson et al. 2018, Neger et al. 2019, and Rainey et al. 2017 all suggest the idea that behavior management strategies and instructional approaches are not separate from each other. And so those articles or those researchers suggest that when teachers see behavior management as separate from creation of instructional content or creation of activities, the behavior management in their space suffers. And so this makes a necessary connection between the idea that in order for our classroom management and behavior management to be effective, it has to be integrated with our instructional approaches, which is huge support for this idea of incorporating more movement, incorporating movement-based instruction, and incorporating more MVPA into our students' day-to-day. Three of the most important findings from my research are that first, MBI has a clear positive impact on memory, behavior, and attention, which is a huge finding. Secondly, that it complements other effective classroom management strategies, which means that it could be more easily incorporated into what already happens in a classroom and wouldn't necessarily require huge revolutionary changes in the instructional techniques. And third, Conceptually, MBI can be broken down into categories of relevance and integration. And so the research that I did drew a really strong connection between part of my design challenge, distracting movement-based behaviors, the concepts of attention, and the concepts of behavior. And so the research suggests that these distracting movement-based behaviors may come from problems attending, struggles with maintaining on-task behavior, um, and could be an indicator that more movement-based instruction is needed in order to alleviate some of those behaviors. And so my solution will definitely be around incorporating more MBI into my classroom. Thank you so much for listening.